My parents left for Italy with my sister after my car crash. We're off to Rome for fun. Don't call. An unsettling start. Although it is believed that family never dies, what happens if your relatives turn against you? What if the people who are supposed to keep you safe turn on you in the most horrible way possible, abandoning you as if you were nothing? This is my narrative. A story of devotion, dedication, and cold deceit that left me brokenhearted. Even though my older sister, Katie, had refused to work for almost a year, I was the only one at 27 who kept my family together, paid the bills, and kept everyone afloat. To please them, I paid for every facet of my ideal vacation to Rome. However, life can be cruel at times. I was broken and barely alive after a horrendous car accident that landed me in the ICU. My family abandoned me in a hospital bed after stealing my trip, money, and trust instead of standing by my side. Pushpin Chapter 1. The betrayal that changed everything. They assumed they had gotten away with it. Family, in my opinion, always meant unwavering support, even after you had given it all. When I awoke in a hospital bed alone, I realized I had been replaced, which shook my conviction. I was not to blame for the collision. I was traveling home from work when a thoughtless driver ran a red light and collided with my car. After everything had gone dark, there were unexpected flashes of light, loud voices, and searing pain. When I finally opened my eyes, the harsh white lights in the hospital room made my head ache. Machines generated background beeps. I hadn't noticed how much my body hurt. All of this didn't matter because my first thought was to grab my phone, expecting dozens of missed calls and frantic texts from my loved ones. None existed. Instead, I received a single text message from my mother. "We're currently boarding. I hope you are getting better. Are you getting on board?" As I stared at the screen, my brain struggled to keep up. Then, like a second impact, it hit me. The voyage. As a gift for my parents, I had planned their dream trip to Rome, with all expenses covered. To ensure they had the perfect getaway, I worked additional hours, rescheduled vacations, and saved every dime. And now they were traveling without me, while I lay in a hospital bed, unable to move. There must have been some error. I attempted to call my sister Katie, father, and mother. No response. My fingers shook as I sent the text. "What is boarding to you? Are you still going?" There were 3 dots. A pause. Then came the answer, which shattered what little trust one still had. Well, there was no return on the tickets. It'd be a shame to waste them. Furthermore, Katie would benefit from the respite. Katie. Naturally. It wasn't even her goal to leave. I presented the book to our parents as a gift. However, I had been whisked away from my own aspirations in the blink of an eye. Something inside me cracked. The pain was what had broken me, not the accident. My family saw me as nothing more than a resource, a living bank account, which broke my heart. I thought about the previous year. I'd paid numerous bills for them. I paid Katie's rent when she resigned from her job because she felt unappreciated. I also covered the costs of groceries, therapy, and doctor's visits. I had given up all to save them the hardship. And when did I need them? They departed. My phone vibrated once more. "We will email you photos. Take a snooze. I adore you. Love." The lump in my throat stopped me from laughing. The nurse entered and grumbled as she scanned the empty room. "Softly, no visitors," she queried. I exchanged a head shake. After a brief hesitation, she reached over and straightened my blankets. "You know, sometimes the people who check in on us aren't the ones we expect." She was right. Because when my door cracked open a few hours later, it was my pals and not my family. When I tried to object, my coworker Beth rolled her eyes and offered me coffee. "Do not even begin. You'd reciprocate for me." I hadn't spoken much with my neighbor, Mrs. Jensen, until she walked in with a number of cheap daisies. Then there was Lucas, my best buddy, grinning as he set down a box of my favorite chocolates. "Guess you finally found a way to take a vacation, huh?" They were present. They were concerned. My family is not the one I was born into, but the one I selected. And I made a decision as I sat there, surrounded by the love of those who actually cared about me. I would never again let my relatives take advantage of me. It would be too late when they crawled back. They were mistaken. Chapter 2. Betrayal takes place. Isabella was always aware that her family did not consider her a daughter, but rather a duty. She hadn't realized how little she meant to them until she was lying in a hospital bed, bruises covering her ribs and sutures pulling into her flesh. She had awakened up. There were no flowers present. No notes. There are no anxious whispers from family members as they wait for her to open her eyes. Instead, she saw a frigid fluorescent light throbbing overhead, and the first thing she heard was a nurse's bored voice informing her that her family had been here but had left. Left. Isabella croaked through her dry throat. Where did they go? Before responding, the nurse paused to review the chart. They said they had a flight to catch. A plane. It was like a kick in the stomach. She had spent months planning her parents' once-in-a-lifetime trip to Rome, including 5-star hotels, first-class flights, and tailored excursions. It had been perfected with every penny she saved and every hour of overtime. They're on that vacation right now. I wasn't with her. And now she lay broken and forgotten. Isabella managed to maintain her composure despite the deceit that was consuming her. There must have been a reason for them. Perhaps they imagined she'd be fine. Perhaps they planned to return as soon as she was discharged from the hospital. She then grabbed her phone, however. There were no missed calls. Do not text. She opened it with trembling hands and went through the family group chat. Her mother left her a final message 2 hours ago. We've just touched down. Rome is wonderful. Katie already has a shopping addiction, laughs. We will send photos. I hope your condition has improved. Red art. Isabella's face drained of blood. They had not abandoned her. They had brought her sister, Katie, instead. The tipping point. Isabella stared at the screen for a long time, her mind unable to process its harshness. They had departed, but that wasn't all. They had done it that way, without regret, question, or second thoughts. Her mother had not even acknowledged the accident. Not one, "We're sorry you couldn't come." Simply, Rome is breathtaking. A sense of numb peace settled over her. She exhaled a breath. She then progressively deleted the group chat. Isabella was released 2 days later. She did not return home. She went to the bank. Isabella had been paying for all of the household expenditures for the past year, including food, bills, the mortgage, and even Katie's therapy appointments. They were convinced that they needed her. They would be unable to survive without her. She was the person in command. Isabella recognized something, though, as she stood in front of the bank teller, withdrawing every cent from the account her parents had access to. They had never required her. All they needed was what she had to provide. Counterstrike, Isabella canceled the trip. The lodging facility offers paid tours. Paid tours. Flights return. Outside the hospital, she sat in her car and spoke with the travel agency while listening to hold music on the phone. She said calmly, "I would like to cancel all reservations made in my name." The agent paused. "Your family is already present, ma'am." "Are you sure?" "Cancel them." The repercussions. It wasn't long before the call started. Mom. Her father. Katie. Her phone buzzed with urgent texts, one after the other. "What did you do?" "We do not have a hotel, Isabella. There are no return flights available." "How could you do this?" "This is immature. Fix it." She read them all. She then blocked their telephone numbers. She didn't need to read their arguments. Since the truth was clear, their decision was made. She'd done the same thing now. Chapter 3. The Ultimate Betrayal Pushpin. Isabella opened her eyes to the hospital room's harsh lights. Every breath was a reminder of the accident, and her body ached. A car speeding through a red light, metal shrieking, the world flipping, and then blackness had all occurred in an instant. She had expected to hear agitated voices when she awoke. Her sister Katie sat by her bed, her hands shaking with concern, and she expected to see her parents hovering. But there was silence in the room. The door opened with a squeak. "Oh, it is good. You are conscious." Isabella looked back to see her father, mother, and Katie standing there. But there was an issue. She couldn't pinpoint the emotion that had replaced the relief she had imagined in their eyes. How long have I been here?" Her throat was dry, and she croaked. 2 days, her father replied abruptly. 2 days. She'd been alone in a hospital bed for 2 days. Her mother said, "The doctors say you're stable now," with an unsettlingly official tone. This, of course, is a relief. However, we need to discuss something important. Isabella's heartbeat was racing. Is everything in order? What is the matter? Katie attempted a smile as she moved forward, clearing her throat. Well, we had to make a decision while you were unconscious. Regarding the trip to Rome. Isabella was filled with nausea. She asked, the Rome trip. Her mother stated, we wanted to ensure the tickets were not wasted. So we made a small adjustment. A small adjustment, Isabella replied, her words barely formed. Katie held her hands together in a clasp. We decided that instead of you going, I should go in your place. Quiet. Isabella blinked as she struggled to absorb the information. You're joking. Her mother let out a sigh. We pondered waiting, but the expenses had already been paid. We didn't understand why such a costly trip would go unused. Katie gave an emphatic nod. You're aware of my lifetime dream to visit Italy. Visiting Italy benefits both of us. We get to enjoy the event while you get some rest. Isabella thought someone had removed the air from the room. I planned that trip, she explained in a raspy whisper. I paid the cost. To give you that pleasure, I saved for months. Her father said, and we're grateful, with no reservations. That's why we didn't cancel it. The betrayal seemed stifling. You took my accident as an opportunity? Isabella's tone wavered. To steal my gift to you and give it to Katie instead? Katie was daring enough to shrug. You can't leave right now. You're stranded here. Isabella felt something snap within her. The devotion. The costs. Her years of putting her family first, working long hours to support their bills, and contributing to Katie's therapy sessions had all been in vain. They'd made their own decision. Once again, she fixed her focus on them, remembering their emotions and how casually they dismissed her as an afterthought. You're right, she said quickly, her tone icy cold. I'm stuck here. Her family was obviously uncomfortable. They assumed she had accepted it. They did not know. Isabella grabbed her phone as the hospital became quiet that night. She canceled everything with careful slowness. She received all of her tickets back, including the return flights, after making the initial call to the airline. The hotel is next. Instead of just canceling their stay, she demoted them to Rome's lowest and smallest hostel, which offered no reimbursements and shared bunk beds. She then contacted the travel agents and canceled all of the prepaid vacations. Her hands were steady by the time she put down the phone. Allow them to find themselves with nothing when they arrive in Rome. Make them realize that the only thing keeping their world together was the daughter they had discarded. Isabella had a thrill this morning that she hadn't felt in years. Liberty. Pushpin Chapter 4, A Successful Betrayal. Isabella rested in the spotless hospital bed, the only sound being the steady beep of monitors. The sting of betrayal was far more intense than the ache from the injury. She had given up everything for her family for a year, including paying the mortgage, her sister Katie's therapy, and their bills. And now? They had dismissed her as if she were an afterthought. Her mother had stated over the phone, "We're still going to Rome," with a happy, almost ecstatic tone. But since you can't go, we thought we'd bring Katie instead. She was barely conscious when they made their decision. Without hesitation. There's no conversation. I don't care about her feelings. Isabella understood right there, lying helpless in her hospital bed. She had reached her destination. She had never been considered a daughter, but rather a resource. Not a sister, but a bank. However, this is no longer the case. They were about to learn the consequences of pushing someone too far. The configuration. Isabella was released from the hospital 1 week later. Every breath still hurt from the bruising on her ribs, but she didn't have an opportunity to linger on the pain. She needed to continue with her task. We reserved the following day for our trip to Rome. For weeks, Katie and her parents had been bragging about it and sending her links to hotels and tours they had booked. It was supposed to be their ideal escape. It was going to be their worst nightmare because of her. She began by accessing her financial accounts. She had been keeping track of their budgets and paying their expenses for the past year, connecting her finances to theirs. It had given her newfound confidence. She used it right now. She canceled the flights with a few clicks. Next, please proceed with making your hotel reservations. Then she methodically scheduled every paid tour and dinner appointment. The funds were instantly restored to her own account. She then glanced at their credit cards. She had made the payments. Was she not present when the payments were made? The cards did not function as anticipated. Do payments occur automatically? Cancelled. Their cards would be frozen by the time they arrived at the airport and were about to check in. She also refused to accept their calls. The repercussions. Isabella watched the chaos unfold in real time as she sipped her coffee the next morning. Her phone was continually vibrating. Mom missed 18 calls. 25 texts from Katie. Voicemails followed. Isabella, what the hell did you do? Her mother's voice yelled. At the airport, we're stuck. We're unable to check in. The hotel claims that the reservation has been canceled. What's happening? We are unable to use our credit card. I need this error corrected right away. Isabella erased each note with a wicked smile, not hearing the end. For the first time in years, she did not have to deal with their problems. She imagined them at the airport counter, realizing that their daughter, upon whom they had always relied, had finally interrupted them. She could hear the terror in their voices as they implored hotel workers to inform them that their magnificent apartment was no longer accessible. Katie's eyes welled up with fear when she realized her free vacation had disappeared. That was poetic justice. She'd lost everything because of them. She had retracted everything. The repercussions. By the end of the day, the texts had transformed from wrath to despair. Mom, we need money to pay for our ticket home. Isabella, please. Katie, you're going overboard. Could we have a conversation? Mom, there are no other options. We need you, sweetheart, please. Her fingers hovered over the screen as she studied the texts. Then she turned her phone off. She owes them nothing. Their decision was made. She was currently constructing her own. Isabella was free for the first time in her life. The Collapse, Chapter 5. Isabella sat in the hospital bed, looking through the barrage of texts on her phone. Each notification from the same people who had abandoned her was filled with shame, desperation, and rage. Mom, Isabella, what did you do? We have no money or lodging, so we're stuck in Rome. How could you be so cold-hearted, Mom? Your family is us. Katie, whoa. Isabella, you are quite mature. You're acting like a spoiled kid. You're the reason we are suffering. Mother, please take care of this matter now. Isabella exhaled deeply and placed the phone on the tray table next to her unfinished meal. She expected this response after canceling the bookings and sending a refund for each ticket. She was shocked at how liberating it would feel. For once, she did not serve as a safety net. They were the ones who fell for it once. The ideal storm. Without looking back, her mother and Katie had left the hospital, excited to begin their once-in-a-lifetime excursion. They hadn't even called her after the operation to see if she needed anything. They needed her now, though. With her eyes closed, Isabella saw them standing outside the beautiful hotel in Rome, carrying their bags, and being surprised when the concierge informed them that their reservation was no longer valid. The card they wanted to use to pay was canceled. What about compensated transportation? Lost. Their lovely journey had come to an end the moment they landed. She could see their mounting concern as they desperately searched for another hotel, only to learn too late that everything was far out of their price range. Really, it was poetic. She was now reduced to begging, the same woman who had ignored Isabella's sacrifices and taken without remorse. The disintegration begins. Her phone vibrated once more. Mom, we're in a dreadful neighborhood in a terrible little motel. This is embarrassing. Katie, I hope you are satisfied with your accomplishments. She did not feel proud. She was not apologetic, however. For years, they had been slowly eroding her foundation, and she had been the unseen support system that kept them afloat. She had sacrificed her own happiness to ensure they lived well, paid their bills, and paid for Katie's therapy. She had now let them feel what it was like to stand alone for the first time. They were also collapsing. 2 days passed. Next, 3. Her mother quit messaging her in wrath. Katie began sending anxious and then urgent messages. Finally, one arrived, which made Isabella think. Mom, Katie had a meltdown today. They yelled in my face in front of everyone, referred to me as self-centered. They implied that it was solely my fault. Isabella took a big breath. At last, the blame had shifted. Their relationship had always been rocky and built on mutual entitlement, not genuine love. That misconception was bound to be broken in due course. The turning point. Her mother called on the fourth day. Isabella looked at the television for a long time. Then she responded slowly. Isabella. Her mother's voice seemed hollow and strained. All right, you've won. Please fix this. When we return, we may talk. Isabella held the phone tighter. Make it right. She has only ever been a fixer for them. No. Calm and steady was the word. Quiet. Sharp disbelief ensued. Excuse me? You heard me. Isabella, this is absurd. We're your family. You made that obvious when you left me in a hospital bed, Isabella said in a detached tone. Back then, you didn't care. What makes me care now? This is different. Isabella answered, No, Mom, in a firm voice. This is the first time you're facing the consequences of your choices. Her mother stuttered over her words, but Isabella knew exactly what she wanted to say. She simply said, Good luck, before hanging up. An alternative form of liberty. She felt the load leave her chest. She experienced liberation for the first time. They would no longer depend on her. She would no longer be a victim. She smiled as she stared out the hospital window at the distant, flickering city lights. Her vacation to Rome was not canceled. She'd still leave. By themselves. August 8th. Pushpin Chapter 6. The Final Betrayal. ChatGPT informs. Isabella viewed the city lights below from the window of her high-rise apartment. The sound of her phone vibrating on the marble countertop behind her mingled with the gentle hum of traffic. She did not need to look. She recognized the individual. Mom. Or, more specifically, the lady who had shaped her into the family's financial support system for years before discarding her when she became unusable. She let the phone ring. A minute later, another message arrived. Mom, we need to discuss, Isabella. Please. Then another. Mom, we need help, even though I understand you're furious. Your sister is having troubles. It was there. The underlying source of her mother's sudden worry. Not regret. Not regret. Simply necessary. A golden child's decline. Isabella had received the first sign of her family's demise only a few days before. An old coworker sent her a link via SMS. You must watch this. She halted at the news site's headline. Failed luxury brand CEO faces bankruptcy after investment fraud allegations. Katie's normally clean face was obscured by the words, resulting in a harsher, more desperate expression. The article revealed everything, including how investors were departing, how debt had increased, and how Katie engaged in questionable investment techniques. The downfall of everything Isabella had unintentionally given for her sister. She was aware that it would occur eventually. Katie has always been irresponsible with money, spending it rapidly while earning it slowly. Isabella had never dreamed she would steal. But there it was. The family was now suing her sister, who had once been its most valuable asset. And, as expected, they approached her. Not to apologize. Not to make things right. But to make it better. A mother's request. Once again, the phone rang. Isabella picked up this time. Anxiety stripped away her mother's usual superiority, and her voice rose. Isabella. At last. You are necessary for us. Isabella leaned against the counter, exhaling slowly. Do you? You are aware of Katie's predicament, her mother insisted. She isn't doing well. The media is tearing her apart, and investors have threatened Isabella with legal action. That's unfortunate. Unfortunate? Her mother's voice rose in surprise. She could go to prison. So, Isabella spoke in an unusually calm tone. Quiet. Isabella, please. Her mother's tone softened and shifted to the subtle persuasion she had used throughout her youth. We're related. My point is serious, even if I am aware that we have disagreed. Your sister's name is Katie. She needs you. The way I needed you when I was in that hospital bed? Isabella's tone was calm, but the edge beneath it was distinct. More silence. Replied, that was a misunderstanding. She gave forth a hollow, frustrated laugh. No, it was my decision. As if it were mine. Isabella, please. Isabella said, I'm sure Katie will figure something out. Do you believe she always does? After all, she is the stronger person. Silence for a beat. Her mother's voice then turned chilly. Are you serious about doing this? Will you abandon your own blood? The final string of guilt snapped in Isabella's head. No, Mom. I'm only now putting what you taught me into practice. She hung up after saying that. Resolution, as per her terms. She placed the phone face down on the counter after staring at it for a minute. A year ago, Isabella would have given way. A year ago, Isabella would have rushed to their rescue. However, when she awoke in that hospital room and realized no one had arrived, that version of herself died. Her reflection stared back at her as she approached the window. For the first time, she did not see anyone burdened by family responsibilities. Someone was available, she noted. The toughest lessons in life, the strength of leaving. Knowing when to depart is one of the most crucial lessons in 2025 as the world grows more connected. Isabella's story reminds us that our worth is defined by how well we treat ourselves, not how much we put up with for others. We often stay in exhausting relationships because we believe that being loyal necessitates making sacrifices. True love, however, does not require pain, whether from partners, family, or friends. This is an even more significant lesson for the older generations. You do not have to put up with mistreatment simply because you have a similar background. Leaving problematic relationships is a self-respecting decision, not a cruel one. In 2025, prioritize satisfaction over duty and peace over obligation. As Isabella discovered, silence, distance, and a well-lived life are frequently more powerful statements than retribution. It is never too late to make your own decisions.